Hey, if you show a baby a robot, it's going to show signs of distress. It does not like artificial intelligence, it's confused by it. Although it would prefer artificial intelligence over no stimulation at all, it babies definitely prefer humans and, being reflected positive facial expressions. So that dichotomy of a baby knowing intuitively that artificial intelligence is not, there's something wrong there, is literally the life of an empath, okay? Because the empath, and especially if you are a very empathic child, you saw one face and felt another and were very confused by that. And that's true for most people. God, it felt so safe when like somebody was like congruent, felt so natural to be with them, but most people don't feel like that. So I want to talk about how empaths can be subtly self-destructive and not even know it. I know I've said this before, but I really need to drive this home. Okay? So if you are somebody who you feel more deeply than others, you've always known this to be true, you see at a level of love and you have a desire for peace more than most people that you've ever met. You have a very unique way of seeing and feeling the world that people are drawn to you simply because it's easy to be around you, because you actually tend to pick up on their vibration and meet them where they are. If that's you, you are very likely an empath. And if that's you, I want you to take that really seriously, because for years, they say that if you put two bipolar people into a room with 100 people, those two bipolar people will leave together by the end of the night. And if you put two people on acid, the same in a room full of 100 people, the same thing is going to be true. And where empaths are concerned, most empaths, especially who are raised in toxic situations, and I'm more so talking to you if you are somebody who is an empath raised empathing actually with a codependent, which was very confusing because watching the codependent switch faces is very unusual to see. And then there's the opposite, which might be the narcissist who is in charge of the whole atmosphere of the space. So anyway, if you are somebody who always was trying to keep peace in your family and felt like you knew how to be the rock, the center, the equilibrium, because that was a survival mechanism, you're likely an empath, okay? So I want you to get that the transference of feelings is very real. There was this app years ago that was called the Bump app, and all you would have to do is get the app, and then you could touch touch phones, and the whatever apps you wanted would be downloaded to the other phone just by touch, okay? That is how emotions work, and if you are an empath, you have to understand that the people that you are hanging around with, this is the element of self-destruction. You might be picking up on their feelings and their experiences and reacting as if they are your experiences, right? So if they're anxious, you might all of a sudden feel really anxious and then start to create from that anxiety, like, oh my God, why am I anxious right now? Oh, maybe it's because that girl looked at me that way, and why was she looking at me that way? And then you go down the rabbit hole of anxiety, and you're creating situations in your vibrational field, in your physical experience, based on somebody else's emotion that was pretty much, if you are an untrained empath, you are a dumping ground for that scenario. That is a very self-destructive adulthood seed of being an empath. When you don't know that you're picking up on somebody else's emotions, that it's not actually yours, and you start to create. And yes, in oneness, they're all of ours, right? And the empath transmutes these emotions. But if you are just learning about how to utilize empathy, because the thing about an empath is we never learned how we felt. We knew how everybody else felt, but leave us in a room alone for a second and we're neurotic because we're so used to, like, okay, I know what my place is when I am meeting the emotional demands of this atmosphere, whatever that atmosphere is. And sadly, most empaths are raised in toxic situations, that's because we chose to come in that way. It is what it is. And the negativity of those toxic situations brings a lot of projection from the external world into the empath. And cognitively, then our cognitive empath, our cognitive empathy, which is different than our feeling empathy. Our feeling empathy is emotional empathy, is I literally feel what you feel. Cognitive empathy is I can literally think what you're thinking. Ideally, both are congruent. And if you have more of one than the other, it's not necessarily the best thing in the world. But cognitive empathy, when we can go, okay, well, they're telling me I'm like lazy. So now I have to overcome this aspect of me, even though I'm like a 4-year-old kid that thinks that I'm a problem because I'm lazy. Or they're telling me that I eat too much and I'm confused because I'm just I'm just eating what they're giving me. So, there's all of these cognitive projections that go on, and then you go, I must be wrong. It must be me, okay? So then what happens because of that must be me, that must be wrong? We try to overcompensate. So this is like no different than growing up and taking a career that you don't want because your family wants you to take it. Because we are overcompensating for those things that were projected onto us, and then we form an identity based on not being enough, based on compensating for all of the things that we were projected onto that were wrong with us, that were literally projections of somebody else's shadow self. And that's what I believe really happens with empaths coming in, especially with narcissistic parents. I deeply believe that this is, I think a parent has the opportunity to see their child as a reflection of their absolute love or their absolute fear. So their child is literally going to be their absolute shadow, or they're going to love and dote on them. And if you are the empath in that situation, whether you're being the one loved on and doted on, that's going to be confusing, especially if you have other siblings, because then you're going to feel like you have to keep that pedestal because you know that somebody who does that doesn't actually, there's not a value exchange as far as like you, the inside of you actually matters. It's like what you do for me. Or if they are, I forget where I was going with that, but the parent oftentimes, we'll see the child as the shadow self and then project that onto them, and then the empath becomes their own version of their parents' projected shadow self. And then we wonder why we grow up into adulthood going, who the fuck am I? Okay. So when you don't formulate your own identity, you don't have your own identity. So we are raised to acquiesce to other people's preferences and other people's desires and other people's emotional security, and that's a defense mechanism. It's being able to tell, okay, I know that my father was drinking just based on the way that it smells when I walk in the house. I know that, oh my God, my mom is not home yet, which means maybe she's having an affair, and my dad is sitting here bugging out about it, and I can feel him. And like, I just want my mom to come home, so I'm going to distract my dad from that experience, or whatever. Those tendencies of, I have to fix you because I can see that there's two things going on here, and that is actually not even for your benefit, but for mine. That's very confusing for me. So I want to like get you on the side of like, okay, like all of your parts are coming together. It's not one face confused with emotions in the background that as an empath are not congruent. So it can be really confusing to live life as an empath until you are aware that you're not insane and that what you perceive is real. And yes, sometimes it is your own shadow self, but the more work you do, the more self-work you do as an empath, you will recognize the difference between what somebody else is triggering in you and what somebody else is actually basically dumping onto you. And it's not like dumping, it's just you pick up on it because you have mastered the clarity of the energetic field simply because you needed to do that in order to maintain energetic space while you were growing up. So the ultimate self-destruction of the empath is that you, one, haven't yet formed your own identity because you've been living the projections of other people onto you, the cognitive projections, and you have built an identity around that instead of your actual truth. And then there's the negating that empathy is real, that when you hang out with somebody who's anxious and you leave and you're anxious for 3 days, it's not likely going to go away until you recognize, oh, this isn't mine. I can let this move through me. There's no work to do here. This actually was just something that came, like it came, it sticks. I'm telling you, that bump app is how emotions work for an empath. And I think that they work that way for a lot of people too, but a lot of people aren't nearly as open as empaths because they didn't have to hone the skill of being empathic because they were raised in, different kinds of situations where emotional regularity wasn't as important. Survival didn't depend on keeping daddy not angry. So just be aware of this if you are an empath, that your most self-destructive things that you can do is keep living the life that was projected onto you, because God, you don't have to, and not taking seriously that somebody else's emotions can have a really serious effect on you. And that also goes, if you're a really serious empath, I often empath with people before I even see them. And or I'll get, if I am entangled in a coaching relationship with somebody, it's literally, I can feel, I'll have the same exact physical ailments going on, I'll have the same exact desires going on, and then my clients will go, oh, this is coming up for me, and I'm like, oh, this is my entanglement with you, which is why it's so important to choose also who you want to entangle energy with, because projections are important, dude. They're real. If people even from across the world are projecting onto you and you're an empath, and don't get all scared and think you have to shield yourself, because that's an ego body and it's not going to do any harm to you whatsoever, because you're fucking amazing and your source energy. But it does have an effect on your cognitive empathy. It does. You can feel what people are thinking and feeling about you, and you can feel what people are thinking and feeling about other people. But sometimes it's just like you can get bombarded with strangers from across the country that you don't even know. Okay, that's real. Don't negate that. So it's so important to, while you're on the journey of self-discovery, know what work you have to do versus what is somebody else's work moving through you that you're actually supposed to transmute, rather than, because the master of themselves is going to be somebody who assesses and goes, okay, well, what is this? What emotion is this? What does this mean? What should I do with it? But if you are mastering other people so often that you can't even figure out how you feel, then there's an incongruence in who you've come here to be, what you've come here to actually do and show the world. So don't negate your empathy, okay? And notice when you self-destruct, because it's a real thing, okay? And I want you to live a pretty radical life. So I hope this was helpful. I love you.